everyone. Welcome to today's By Design Customer Hours session. My name is Will Polakowski, and I'm a Senior Analyst here at TDCI in support. Today's session, we're going to talk about manufacturing rules in Syteline. So let me just talk a little bit about different pieces of the presentation today. We're going to do an overview of the Syteline adapter. Then we're going to talk about each of the manufacturing rules in a little bit detail, and again how they interact with Syteline environment. Go through an example rule set that I've built that'll show how you can link everything together, build your BOM and routing structure, and how all that ends up in Syteline. Do some job creation troubleshooting. So these are just some errors that I've collected through various support cases, and try to show you some of those and how to work through those and some things to check. Populating additional fields in Syteline. And then just talk about some additional considerations with the manufacturing rules in the Syteline adapter. Okay, so again, before we go into the manufacturing rules in detail, I just want to step back and talk a little bit about how the Syteline adapter actually works. So the first things that happen when you run through a configuration is the configuration data is saved to the by design output tables in the Syteline application database. And for those of you that have walked through the install process, during the install process we actually put a set of tables and stored procedures within your Syteline application demo or application database. Okay, and that's where our configuration is initially, the configuration data is initially stored. Once you finish a configuration, then the Syteline adapter stored procedure will run, and it will move manufacturing, pricing, price information, order detail, configuration data from our by design output tables to the config underscore tables, again in the Syteline application database. Okay, and those are a set of 4 tables that our data is kind of aggregated into before it gets moved over into the job and order tables, etc. So, and that's the final piece. Step 3 is once the data is in there, then Syteline takes over and takes everything from the CFG underscore tables and runs the job creation process, excuse me, and processes all the data in order to create the jobs and subjobs within Syteline. Okay, so that's an overview of what is actually happening when you launch the configurator from Syteline and click Finish, and how everything gets created on the Syteline side. Okay. Something else I want to talk about is just item setup in Syteline, because this is pretty important thing that you need to do before you can configure the items and have the jobs created correctly. So the first thing is items must be set up as order configurable in order to be configured from an order estimate line. And I'm just going to bring up Syteline here. And I'll bring up a sample item. So we'll bring up the customer hours item that I've created for this session. So you see that there is an order configurable checkbox, a job configurable checkbox, an auto job generation, so it's either always going to generate a job, it's going to prompt you to generate a job, or it's never going to create the job. Okay, and the namespace is the namespace or plant that it is in your by design model database. So items must be set up as job configurable in order to be configured from a job. Okay, so if you only have an item that's order configurable, you will not be able to configure that item from the job. Okay. So in the bottom here, in the bottom of this slide, I've got just a table of how all this works. So if an item is marked as order configurable only, okay, your job BOM source will be the configurator model. Okay, it's not going to look at the current BOM, but when the configuration is returned to Syteline, it's not going to automatically create the job for you because you did not click on the job configurable button. However, if you click the XREF button within a job or within that customer order line, for example, it'll go ahead and create the job for you. Okay. If you have both order configurable and job configurable checked on an item, then when you return to Syteline, depending on your auto job generation setting, it's either always going to create your job, It's going to prompt you, or again, it's not going to create your job. And if it's never, then still, if you click the XREF button, it's still going to click that for you. Now, again, the job BOM source, when an item has been marked as order and job configurable, is going to be the configurator model. So how you've defined your BOM and routing structure in the configurator model, when that data is, or when Syteline picks up the data from those CFG underscore tables and it creates the job, it's going to use that. Even if a current BOM has been created for an item. I mean, typically for configured items, they don't have current BOM, but just in case an item had a current BOM and then it was moved to a configured item, it's still going to use the BOM that's returned from the configurator. And then if a job is marked as job configurable only, again, it's going to create the job depending on, well, it's going to create the job. Typically, you would have this for an item that you don't want to configure, but you want it to get its BOM and routing structure from the configurator. So in that case, if you're not going to order an item, but it's part of it's a component, it's a manufactured component of, let's say, this customer hours part, then you would want to make sure that you at least have that as job configurable, so that Syteline says, hey, I should go get my BOM and routing structure for this item from the configurator. Okay, and if neither one of these boxes are checked, then it's going to use the current BOM and Syteline. Now keep in mind that even if you have a BOM and routing structure defined in the configurator and the job configurable is not checked, it's still going to look at the current BOM even if it's blank. So that's something that people typically run into quite often. Okay, so that's kind of how those options work on the configuration tab of an item. Okay, and we'll get a little bit more into that as we go along. Okay, so now the next thing I want to talk about is how the by design rules in Design Studio. So I'm just going to bring up Design Studio here. How each one of these map into Syteline. So a BOM component rule, and I'll just put each one of these in my rule set here as we're talking about it. Okay, that represents a manufactured component in Syteline. Okay, a material rule represents a standard item. So just think about this. Think about this as a purchased item in Syteline. Okay, something that's not going to have a configuration associated with it. An operation rule. Okay, that's an operation step in your routing structure. A work instruction rule. Okay, that's an operation notes in Syteline. And then the create component rule. This is a configurable item, and what this will actually do, it will call another rule set. So if you, we'll look at this in the model, but it'll call another rule set within your current rule set. Okay, so think about it. If you've configured our bike example, there's a wheel rule set out there. So within your bike rule set, while it's presenting those rules to the user, it'll also bring up rules from the wheel rule set and present those to the user at the same time. So we'll get into that in a little bit. I'll show you how that works. Okay, and again, now we're going to go into each one of these rules in a little bit more detail. And I'm just going to exit out of this.